Welcome to Reflections. I'm your host Jaswant Lalwani, and my guest today is BJ Arun. BJ Arun is a successful serial entrepreneur and is currently the chairman of the Global Board of Trustees of TIE. But more importantly, we will be talking about his passion for Indian history towards the end of the episode, and that should be very interesting. So Arun, you've been a successful serial entrepreneur living in Silicon Valley. What were some of your major projects which you're proud of and which you could share with us?
Sure, and thank you for having me, Jaswant. I started as an entrepreneur pretty early in life. And one of the reasons why I did that was my parents were pretty middle class in Bangalore, India. And, of course, they did with the best of their resources to send me to a very, very good convent school in Bangalore called Bishop Cotton's. And I would see a lot of my classmates would come in these chauffeur-driven fancy cars, whereas I would be taking either the city bus or later on a cycle. So what I realized is that entrepreneurship is really the ticket to success because you're not limited by a salary, etc. So I got started in entrepreneurship right out of high school. And so my first entrepreneurial venture was when I was in engineering college in Bangalore. So I started my first company then. And then, of course, once you taste the success of entrepreneurship, you never look back. So my first entrepreneurial venture in the US was California Digital, which I founded in 1994. And so to your question, in 2004, we built the world's fastest supercomputer called Thunder at the Lawrence Livermore National Labs. And for that, the Karnataka government honored me with their Rajotsava Day Award, which is the highest civilian award at the state level.
Congratulations. I didn't know that.
Thank you. And then, of course, more recently, I was CEO of a company called July Systems. It was a turnaround opportunity. So I turned it around, made it profitable about 4 years. And in late 2018, we were acquired by Cisco, which is the networking giant.
Yes. And then you had Liberato or something like that.
Yes. Liberato was a company I did in between California Digital and July Systems. And that also had a nice exit, and we were acquired by SolarWinds out of Texas.
Arun, you've had a great trajectory based on what I know. Today, you are the chairman of the Global Board of Trustees of TIE. Everyone knows TIE, but all of us don't know the origin, the genesis, the people behind it, some of the projects you've done. So let's start from the beginning. What is TIE?
So TIE came about exactly 30 years ago. So it was 1992. And by the way, the acronym TIE stood for the Indus Entrepreneurs.
I'm aware of that.
Yes. And so back then, a bunch of people of Indian origin, the people like Dr. Suhas Patil of Cirrus Logic, Kanwal Rekhi of Excelan, they came together and, they realized that rather than, and they had made it big in the early 90s. And I can say literally a handful of people who had made it big because back then there was still a bit of a glass ceiling. And very, very few people became CEOs of companies or took their company through an IPO or a public listing. And so these individuals who had done well for themselves said that rather than sort of make handouts to other people, why don't we teach other people to create value, to create wealth? And so that's how TIE came about. It's probably the only not-for-profit in the world which helps people create profit or create value. And I myself have been a beneficiary of TIE through my whole journey. In fact, I'm one of those rare people who have been a part of TIE for close to 30 years. And so I joined TIE when I was in my late 20s as a volunteer. And then, of course, I got inspired by seeing people like these names I mentioned. And, they helped me along in more ways than one. TIE has been instrumental in finding me my co-founders, my investors, my customers, and even potential acquirers. So it is just an amazing organization that I owed so much to. So when I did have the ability to give back, post the Cisco acquisition, I had some time, I had the resources. So I first got elected as president of TIE Silicon Valley, and now I'm serving as the chair of the TIE Global Board of Trustees. And all of these are pro bono roles, but if you go there with the intention of giving, you just get so much more back in spades.
Who are the other people today or whenever who have played a very major role in TIE, other than the two founders you mentioned?
We literally have hundreds and hundreds of who we call charter members. In fact, we have about 3.5 charter members, 3,500. And charter members are those who have demonstrated very high levels of success, either in their own businesses, or they could even be entrepreneurs and have reached, pretty dizzying heights of their companies. And so we have about 3,500 charter members. Worldwide. And it's an invitation only. So I do, for example, know you're a charter member over here in Thai, New York. And so, it's an invitation-only program. So these charter members, they come, they actually pay 10 times the dues of a regular member with the commitment that they're going to give back to the entrepreneurial ecosystem by helping mentor other entrepreneurs.
Thank you. I'll come back with more, but we'll take a short break and we'll be right back with BJ Arun of Thai. Welcome back to Reflections. We are in conversation with BJ Arun, the chairman of the Global Board of Trustees of Thai. Now, going back to Thai, tell us some of his major achievements of Thai, let's start with the US, and then I want you to tell us about some of the major achievements in India, because that's what I think would interest the audience also.
Sure. Well, as I was saying earlier, 30 years ago, if you were of Indian origin and you just became a manager at a company, it was a cause for celebration. Today, thanks to the efforts of Thai, we have not only broken the glass ceiling, but it's come to a point where if you're of Indian origin today and you're not a co-founder of a company or are not at the C-suite of a company, people look at you funny and say, what happened to you?
Right.
So that's how far we have come. And it's in no small part thanks to the efforts of Thai. They really, really helped us get there. And today, even people like the Sundar Pichais of Google or the Shantanu Narayans of Adobe, all of them are not only our charter members, but these people along their way, along their career path, have come and benefited from the Thai network.
So they're almost alumni of Thai.
You could pretty much say that. In fact, the joke for a while was if they came and spoke at one of our ThaiCon conferences, they would become CEO of their companies. So many of them have come as senior directors or VP of their companies, but a few years later, they do end up as CEOs.
Oh, that's very nice.
Yeah. And so that's in the US.
Right.
You also asked me about the impact of Thai in India and outside of India. And, we have 57 chapters in 12 different countries. But since you specifically asked about India, let me talk about that. We have about 20 some chapters in India itself. But in 2015, one of the first things that the then first-time Prime Minister Modi did was he came to Silicon Valley. So he came to Silicon Valley at the end of 2015. Thai co-hosted his visit. So, I was fortunate to be able to have taken him around with our leadership to, the Zuckerberg meetings and the Pichai meetings, the usual thing. And he was so impressed with what he saw in Silicon Valley that he went back to India and he had Amitabh Kant, who was the CEO of Niti Aayog, say, we need to have something like this in India because we need entrepreneurs to create the jobs and create the wealth. We cannot look to government to, feed the, masses over there. And so they came up with something called the Startup India policy, and Thai had lots and lots of inputs for that. And so we provided a lot of input for that. We helped them with all the different points. And so that itself is a huge
So is it an offshoot of Thai or is it just independent of Thai?
It is a Government of India program, but we did provide a lot of input to that. And so that's at the central level. Even at the state levels, right? At various states, all of the states today want to have their own entrepreneur, ecosystem, and they all look to Thai, mainly because we are a not-for-profit. So even people like myself, we are all, voluntary leaders. Our roles are pro bono. So we're kind of giving our expertise and our networks at no cost to this wonderful cause. And so I think we have a lot of credibility and, it's just people really take advantage of that.
Over the last 20, 30 years since I've been actively in working, Thai Indus entrepreneurs, whatever you call it, has always been something which I've been very aware of as one of the big successes of Silicon Valley and what they've actually engendered and what they've created. So it's always been very impressive. So now let's go back to your current role. As the chairman of the Global Board of Trustees, there are two things I want to ask you. Firstly, by virtue of that role, when you go to India, you probably have a very good opportunity, a very easy opportunity to meet the powers to be, like the Prime Minister Modi, like the President, or whatever it is. Tell me some of your personal experiences, not about business.
Yeah, and again, it's really because of a not-for-profit like Thai that I got access to these amazing leaders. Because how much ever money or wealth you have, you can't buy your way into
Absolutely
dinner
not.
at the Rashtrapati Bhavan or a lunch with the PM, etc. And so, yes, and so, some of my most memorable moments have been in meeting some of these really inspiring leaders. You asked about PM Modi. And again, I mean, we have all kinds of leaders, but he is, I think, the one leader where not only does he work tirelessly, but he is so strategic that he sees something, he realizes that it's something that is going to be useful for India. He immediately wants to
Hones in on
implement,
it.
and he follows up, and he surrounded himself with some amazing officers and just a very, very impressive leader.
Is he warm and friendly in real life?
He is, because, all of these are larger than life figures.
Right.
But when you do meet with them, they make you feel comfortable, and they're just amazing individuals.
And his sartorial elegance. I mean, I'm totally impressed with him each time I see him on the world stage. He really holds his own. He comes across as a very, very confident, sophisticated leader. That's my opinion.
And, it's more than just him as an individual. He's the Prime Minister of India.
I know.
So every time he looks good, India looks good.
Absolutely.
Right? And so, irrespective of one's political leanings, we need to support our leaders. So I was there, for they had a luncheon, the Howdy Modi event with President Trump and
You
Modi.
talk about Houston.
In Houston, yes, I was there, and then of course, I mentioned in 2015 we were there to host him here, and just absolutely amazing opportunities to meet with these people. And similarly, I mean, I had dinner. We had the good fortune that we had gone as a delegation, and we got to meet the late President Pranab Mukherjee for dinner at the Rashtrapati Bhavan. And most of us have seen these amazing buildings from the outside, but to be given an opportunity to go in there and just dine there with that whole pomp and ceremony, which of course I think it was really the British at their peak of their power in India. They built the Viceregal Palace.
And you got a taste of it.
Absolutely. And these are memories I will never forget.
Absolutely. This is fantastic. Worldwide, have you had a chance to meet other leaders and do other things outside US and outside India, or is it more or less US and India centric?
Well, my primary base is Silicon Valley.
Yes.
But one thing which happens is Silicon Valley is so iconic that we have world leaders as well as leaders from various, even states from India come and visit. So each time a chief minister brings a delegation, whether it is from Karnataka or Tamil Nadu or Chhattisgarh or anywhere, they all may call on us. And so we get to meet them, host them. They look up to us.
And that leads to...
Yes.
Okay.
And similarly, I mean, we even have, other countries, right? So whether it's Portugal and, the sort of prime minister of Portugal or, Israel, all of these leaders. And one of the other things that we do is for our charter members, we have something called our global retreats. And we always choose some exotic, destination. I know we go together in Dubrovnik and,
yes.
Some other places. And each time we go there, the local leaders, they roll out the red carpet because they also want to promote entrepreneurship within their own cities and states.
And they've got a captive audience.
They absolutely do.
It's time for a short break again, and we'll be right back with BJ Arun. So don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Reflections. We are in conversation with BJ Arun, the chairman of the Global Board of Trustees. We are talking about his personal life and his personal interests. Now, Arun, before we go to your personal interests, which I am very interested in, what is the latest project as an entrepreneur you're working on?
So post the Cisco exit, again, too young to hang up my hat just yet. But I'm now doing a marketplace for home services. So basically, it's kind of like an Uber for matching up service providers for the home with customers. It's called Clean Fanatics. Currently, I've invested in the business in India. But once we scale across 4 or 5 metros in India, then we'll take it worldwide, definitely for North America, which is where my base is. So that's what I'm doing as a next entrepreneurial venture.
And you're getting a lot of support from your Thai members.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And congratulations. I wish you success.
Thank you.
On that venture. Now, Arun, let's talk about something which is dear to you and to me, and I'm sure the audience. Your love for Indian history. Expand on that.
So I'm going to go back a couple decades. I was in Bangalore in 1999. And, I was just skimming through the local newspaper, and some, hidden away in some third, fourth page, there was a small column saying descendants of Tipu Sultan are there, have come down from Calcutta looking for some compensation for their, families and things like
Reparations, yes.
And, 1999 was the bicentennial of the martyrdom of Tipu Sultan. So the, Fourth Mysore War was 1799, where Arthur Wellesley, who later on went to become the Duke of Wellington, defeated Tipu in Srirangapatna. And so 200 years ago, the state government was taking sort of credit for what Tipu had done fighting the British. So these descendants came down from Calcutta, and they were asking for some pretty meager compensation, something like school fees for their children and a small place to stay, etc. So 2 things happened. One is I went and met these chaps. So I went and met with them.
The descendants of Tipu Sultan.
Yes. And they were so relieved to meet with me because, my mother is from East Bengal. So she's, so I can speak Bengali. And my father is from Karnataka. He's from Bangalore. So I speak Kannada as well. And these chaps, though they are, originally from Mysore, 200 years of having, lived in West Bengal or Bengal, they could only speak Bengali. And so now they were in Karnataka with nobody else able to speak to them in their language. So they just hung on to me and said, hey, you're a lifesaver, somebody we can speak to. But that got me started in saying that if the descendants of Tipu are like this, what's happening with the rest of the descendants of the royals? Now, we hear about a handful of the larger principalities like the Jodhpurs and the Jaipurs and the Udaipurs and
who are
Mysore.
in good shape to start.
They're in very good shape. But Jaswant, we had 577 princely states at the time of independence. And I'll not be amiss to say that at least 500 of them are in abject poverty or in very bad shape.
Correct. And no one knows about them.
Correct. So every time I go to India now, I seek out at least a half a dozen of these people, understand what they're doing, interview them, and record these. And so this is something which is my personal passion. And someday I hope to bring out a book about the descendants of our Indian royals, the Rajas, Maharajas, and Nawabs, and what are they doing today, right? And some of them are literally rickshaw drivers. Some of them working in call centers. So these are just amazing stories.
Tell me, when you meet them, do they realize what has happened to them, from where they've fallen from grace, or they've accepted it very philosophically, or what are their mental makeup according to you?
It depends on the generation I'm speaking with, Jaswant. If I speak to the generation who were there until 71, till the privy purses were abolished, those guys are living in denial because they were born to rule.
Right.
But their children and especially their grandchildren, they've come to terms and they are like any ordinary person. So I think, depending on what generation you're speaking with, either they are in denial, or the younger generation, they've just adapted. And
so your book will really talk about all these 500 plus principalities, or what are the main majority of them? And
what I've done, Jaswant, is in one lifetime, I'm not going to be able to cover 577. So I've taken about 48 representative states. So I've taken, like a dozen from the north, dozen from the south, east, west. There too, I've taken some like 21 gun salutes, some 15 gun salutes.
And the ones who are in dire straits.
And some non-salute states. Then I've taken some Sikh, some Hindu, some Muslim, just to get a flavor of the whole thing.
So, that's very admirable. We are looking forward to the book whenever it comes. But what's interesting is that you've taken a project of this magnitude, and which I think there's a crying need for it. So congratulations again at many levels. So thank you for being here today. And we enjoyed it, and I hope the audience enjoyed it as much as I did. And wish you the best on all your future endeavors. And thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Jaswant, for having me.
But please don't go anywhere. I'll be back with my thought of the date very soon. The German turn of the century philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche said, "He who has a why to live can bear with almost any how." Viktor Frankl, the chief proponent of logotherapy, applied this to his psychoanalysis, which states that the search for meaning in one's life is the primary motivational force in humans. Most importantly, I concur with it because it has been the guiding principle in my life. About 20 years back, I was going through an existential crisis. As chance would have it, I was at dinner with a family whose children were home for the holidays. The eldest was about 21 years age. Apropos of nothing, I asked if he had seen the latest exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum. He replied that he had never been to the Met, at which I suggested he should join me when I go there next. A week later, I took him around to show him my favorite European artists, both pre- and post-Renaissance. At the end, he thanked me, and it was obvious that a small window had opened up in his mind through which the rays of knowledge were beginning to penetrate. At this point, I realized that I had hit upon an idea to pay it forward. I was excited to share my knowledge of travel, art, literature, history, music, but most importantly, my years of lived experience to a younger, more seeking audience. Suffice it to say, I've enjoyed the past 20 years mentoring a large number of young people who, while enjoying my maturity, impart their youthful vibrancy to my life, thereby enhancing my overall sense of well-being. This interconnectedness of the old and the young is the single most important benefit that has accrued to both sides. Wasn't this how it was supposed to be from time immemorial, where the young sat at the fireside listening to the tales of old warriors? It's evolutionary. This is how I fulfilled Nietzsche's maxim, "I've found my why to live." Thank you for watching Reflections, and thank you for being on this journey with me. Looking forward to seeing you again.